Hey guys, it's vf.miniatures Warhammer Tactics series, and today we're talking about the Drukhari, the pointy-eared elves, but not the regal and clean-looking ones. I'm talking about these Dark Eldar. And without further ado, let's dive right in. And first of all, of course, we're going to talk about the strength of this army, and the best thing about them, in my opinion, is their speed. They're one of the fastest factions in the whole game, probably the fastest one if you could count all the units, all the move characteristics, all the stratagems all together. This opens up a whole bunch of tactical possibilities that are just close to most other factions in the game. Turn 1 charges, more efficient scoring of battlefield supremacy, secondaries, for example the good old engage in all fronts, and picking out careless characters that just didn't have the lookout sir behind their backs. The reasons why they are so fast are numerous. First of all, overall high move in the datasheets, the army-wide advance and charge ability that comes on from turn 2, stratagems, fast open-topped transports that allow the units inside to be efficient, plus be fast thanks to the transport's move, and widely available fly keyword. With Drukhari you essentially get 3 armies in one. The Cabal is very different from the Cult, which is very different from the Coven, and you get a whole bunch of datasheets, a whole bunch of models that you can build your lists around and use in a multitude of ways. Plus, most units aren't particularly expensive because of their innate limitations, so you usually get a lot of stuff on the table, which is always a nice feeling. They have one of the best melee blender characters in the whole game in terms of price and their efficiency. You probably won't start a game if you wanted to play competitively without at least 1 or probably 2 very efficient deadly melee characters. They have overall high efficiency in melee. Almost any of their units can fight in at least some capacity, even their vehicles. Probably their vehicles are the best in terms of non-specialized combat vehicles in the game in terms of combat, because they have at least some AP. They don't hit on 6s, they hit on 4s and have good strength and AP. By good AP I mean AP1, which is better than none on rhinos and predators, something like that. They are also highly efficient in shooting thanks to the multitude of different rules and types of weapons they have access to. First of all, the Dark Light, Dark Lances are great weapons. They are very versatile because they have high damage, high AP and high strength, which is always good to have. And they have poison weapons which wound anything in terms of non-vehicles and non-titanic units on 4-ups, no matter how tough the unit is, which is also great. They have Haywire, Eldar thing that helps you deal with vehicles, does mortal wounds to vehicles, and etc. Also, the whole army has this nice rule that's called Blade Artists, and I recommend not to forget about it in the games because it will come up all the time when you're fighting. Basically, it's an additional AP on a wound roll of a 6 that you have on all of your units, and it's constantly active for free. They also get this wonderful rule called Power from Pain, which you've already touched on when we talked about the army-wide advance and charge from turn 2. Basically, as game goes on, your army gets better. So on the first turn you get 6-up and 1 on your whole army, which is awesome because your vehicles only have a 5-up against range attacks. So if somehow you get charged, you at least have a 6-up and 1. From turn 2 you get advance and charge. Turn 3 you get +1 to hit in melee, and also your vehicles and monsters don't suffer the penalty for shooting within the engagement range. And turn 4 you get 5-up and 1. Turn 5 you get auto pass morale, and also your vehicles, anything that has a degrade table, they count as having double the wounds characteristic for the purposes of taking the damage. So overall, a lot is going on for the Drukhari. A lot of things are trying to help and make them tougher, better, because they are at the end of the day only toughness 3 Eldar with 1 wound each usually. So yeah, their survivability isn't by any means perfect, but having a 6-up in 1 on your whole army definitely helps. And also they have access to the wonderful 1 command point lightning fast reactions, which can make almost any unit in the Drukhari army -1 to hit, apart from the Coven units, because Coven units are generally much more survivable innately. They have the Coven-wide 5-up shrug. Let's move on to the weaknesses, and there are a couple here. Of course, first of all, they are not present in the psychic phase at all. The army, the book itself, has only one deny option. It's a relic, and you don't really want to take it, as we'll take a look at in the relics section. But you can always use Abhor the Witch if you are fighting against a psychic heavy army, which is a plus. The toughness 3 infantry and toughness 6 on most of your vehicles and monsters also is not that great, because you'll be much easier to wound, and believe it or not, the toughness 6 and 7 difference really comes up sometimes in the games, so be prepared that your vehicles aren't invincible by any means. You need to be extra careful with your units, because they will get picked up really fast if you aren't careful. The army is definitely command point hungry, and there are not many command point regeneration abilities for them. The characters crave relics and traits, they really need them, and the worst part and the best part all at once is that they really are worth it, because when you upgrade that character, the character will do much more work for you. You are definitely efficient in melee, but don't overestimate your unit's potential, because it's something that I see Drukhari players do a lot in games. They have a very high move characteristic, so they can reach targets that they can't really reach with other armies, so they get too cocky and they start charging stuff that they really aren't supposed to charge at that point in the game or with this particular unit, and they pay for it dearly, because they usually just lose the unit on the counter-offensive or just the counter-attack of the unit that was charged. So pick your fights carefully and be cunning. Their best secondary objective, Herd the Prey, was nerfed in the last update, and now it does not give you that much in terms of points. It only gives you 1 point per table quarter that is completely free from enemy units, and not 2 per table quarter, so it's twice less efficient now. So it's a tiny bit more difficult for you to choose secondaries, but it's still possible, as you will see in the secondary section of the video. Now let's talk about the army composition. I always try to build a balanced force, and I recommend you to do the same, because that's how you get consistent results in games against various opponents, and that's how you get a force that you can really rely on in a pinch. What I like about the Drukhari is, as I said, it's a book that contains basically 3 armies in one, but even though you can build Mono, Cabal, Cult, or Coven, I don't recommend that, and in my humble opinion, the best way to run the army is a mix of 2 or all 3 of those, and we'll do the latter in this case. The Drukhari have this wonderful rule called Radiant Forces Command Point Refund, which allows us basically to have as many patrols as we like. If all our detachments in the army are patrols, Drukhari patrols, we don't pay for any of those, so it's a great rule, which gives you a whole bunch of latitude in terms of your slots. You can have up to 6 HQs if you take 3 patrols, which is usually what I see people take. It's 3 patrols, and you have some slots for your elites, some slots for your fast attacks, and so on and so forth. And all the army rules also work, because obviously the chapter tactic style rules work detachment per detachment. You also have the option of a real space raider detachment, where you take 1 detachment and you basically fill it out with the mix of all the stuff that you want to. You can put your Coven units there, you can put your Cult units there, your Cabal units there, and it will all work together. It will not break the detachment, it will not break your obsessions, so your chapter tactics, basically the Drukhari version of a chapter tactic, and it will all work flawlessly. The only drawback is that you are forced to take 1 Archon, 1 Homunculus, and 1 Succubus, and you also need to have a unit of Rex, a unit of Witches, and a unit of Cabalite Warriors. But for that you get 2 things. First of all, that your Archon now can apply his reroll once to hit aura to all the core units in the detachment, not just the Cabal and Incubi, which is a plus obviously. And you also get access to the stratagem that allows you to get, for 1 command point, you get 3 warlord traits, 1 for your Homunculus, 1 for your Succubus, and 1 for your Archon. Another great thing, it helps you to save on command points, which is important for Drukhari. So you have to figure out for yourself what is the most important for you, and I will try to build the multi-patrol variant of the force, as I said, because that's how I feel most players will probably try to use the Drukhari. Let's first figure out our firepower. I'll give the job to the Cabal of the Black Blackheart because it gives us a single reroll to hit each time the unit shoots or fights, which is incredible on our raiders with a single Darklands shot that will be able to reroll in case it misses the target. Also have a Ravager here with 3 Dark Lenses, obviously, because it's another way to have more Dark Light in our army, and you can swap it if you want to for some Scourges, because it's a different kind of firepower. You can give them the Haywires, which are more efficient against vehicles, but less efficient against stuff like, for example, Terminators, especially Death Guard Terminators. The Dark Light is the perfect weapon against those. But the 3 Raiders is something I definitely recommend because they will carry your troops and they will shoot a lot and will definitely make their points back if you use them correctly. Next, to supplement our shooting even further, I recommend to take a unit of 10 Trueborn with 1 Darklance and 2 Blasters. They will sit in one of our Raiders and try to increase the amount of firepower that we have. The Trueborn, if you don't know, are the upgraded version of the Cabalite Warriors. They get +1 leadership, they get +1 ballistic skill, so they always hit on 2+, and they ignore all modifiers. So even if the target has -5 to hit, they will hit on a 2+, which is incredible. For that, you pay 2 points for each Cabalite Warrior, and also you need to have your Archon upgraded to a Master Archon and pay 15 points for that. It also gives the Archon ability to fight twice, once per game, which is something that you would want to pay 15 points anyways. As one of our main melee threats, I like to add a unit of 10 Incubi. They are great in combat. You need to be careful with them because they will be killed very quickly. The only thing that saves them is their -1 to hit that you can turn on them, and the 2-up save that they have, but in other terms they are still toughness 3, 1 wound elves. There are some arguments to run a unit of 10 and 2 units of 5. The plus side of running 2 units of 5 is that you'll be able to use their Tormentor's ability 2 times instead of 1. Tormentor's is the ability they have that they can, at the start of the fight phase, select 1 unit within engagement range of them, and if they roll on 2d6 more than the leadership of that unit fights last, which is incredible, but it's usually pretty hard to roll over the leadership of someone on 2d6 because the average of the 2d6 is 7 and most elite units have at least leadership 8. That's why it's good to have multiple attempts, which is what the splitting of the 10-man blob helps you with. But having 2 units means having 2 activations. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. I think usually I would like to have just a big unit of 10 Incubi because it's just 1 activation and I can let them all fight before my opponent has a chance to retaliate and select one of their units for the counteroffensive stratagem if I failed to make that unit fight last with the Tormentor's ability or some other ability like the Ancient Evil Warlord trait of the Archon, but I'm running ahead of myself. Another upside of having 2 units of 5 is that you get 2 Clavixes, 2 Sergeants, and each Sergeant has +1 wound, so you get 6 wounds in the squad instead of 5, so that's another thing to consider for you. Moving on to the next patrol, I'm going to select the Cult of Strife. They are great because they get you fight first, always fight first, and they also get you +1 to the charge roll if you're charging the unit that does not have your friendly units within engagement range of it yet. So a great chapter tactic, but the best part about them is in their stratagems, which we are going to talk about a bit later. As another melee threat, I like to run a unit of 10, which is they are incredibly cheap, 110 points for the unit, and have a whole bunch of attacks, which with the help of stratagems can really do some considerable damage. But we need more speed because we are Drukhari, we must be very fast, and for that we're going to take a unit of Reavers with Heat Lances. Heat Lances is basically a melter, but damage d6 +2 always, because it only has 18 inches of range. And the Hellions, so just a unit of 10, they don't have any upgrades on them. I don't recommend to spend points on that. I like both of these units. They are slightly different. The Reavers are slightly faster, but the Hellions have a more attractive profile in melee. They have +1 strength, so strength 4, AP 1, and damage 2 on their Hell Glaives. So both of these units are pretty dangerous in combat, especially Hellions, especially if you don't use them incorrectly and run them into a Dreadnought, which will ignore both your damage 2 and your only AP of 1. Against Dreadnoughts you have Dark Light. You need to use your Hellions against stuff that does not have -1 damage. Finally, the Coven. We need something to absorb damage because, as I like to say, the army has to have some meat on the bones, and otherwise it's too easy just to isolate and destroy your important and very flimsy stuff and leave you with no limbs, no ways to control the game. You need some distraction card effects in our force, and that's what the Coven is going to do for us. And I recommend to run Talas for that, because I really like them. They are very tanky with 7 wounds, 5 up shrug, as I already said, all the Coven units have 5 up shrug, and 6 up and 1 from the power from Bane. And also I like to run them as artists of flesh, so they get -1 damage against strength 7 attacks and lower, so like the ramshackle, the new ramshackle rule on your orcs. They're best used with haywire blasters on their backs and the ichor injectors in their hands. Ichor injector is just a weapon that makes only 1 attack, but if that attack hits, the target suffers D3 mortal wounds, which is great because a unit of 3 Talas can do on average something like 4 mortal wounds each fight phase, which is not bad. It's in addition to your other 4 attacks that you get with the macro scalpel. I also like the grotesques. They are your very, very heavy elite infantry, 4 wounds each, toughness 6 or 5, and depending on whether you have homunculus in nearby or not. And they have this 6 up and 1. Obviously, they fight pretty well, so grotesques are also a great option if you have the models and you like them. For HQs, it's obviously the trio of Archon, Succubus, and Homunculus. I only recommend to run the Homunculus if you have enough core Coven units in your force, because he basically does nothing for your Talas except hitting D3 wounds each turn, which is not something that you want to spend 70 points on, and your HQ slot, and not even the HQ slot is the problem. The problem is that you don't want to have more characters that you basically need, because it will make it too easy to take Assassinate against you, and you don't want that. But you have a whole bunch of Rex and Grotesques. Of course you want Homunculus, because he will give the +1 toughness to them, because they have core, and Talas unfortunately don't have core yet. And the character that no Drukhari army should start the game without is Drazhar. Of course, I recommend to have him always in your list, and we'll talk about him in detail in the special characters section. Just make sure that you don't leave home without him and his Hatred Eternal Warlord trait that allows him to have full rerolls to hit and wound in melee. So the special characters, of course, I'm starting with the Drazhar because he is the best character in the book in my opinion. A melee blender and awesome incubi buffing character, extremely survivable for a Drukhari character because he has a 4 up and 1, 6 wounds, 2+ save, toughness 4 for some reason, -1 damage, built-in fight last potential with his Tormentor's ability. He has the same one as the Incubi. He's very deadly in combat with 5 attacks at strength 6, AP 3, damage 3. A very, very versatile profile, I like it a lot. And 7 attacks at strength 5, AP 3, damage 2. And all that with +1 to wound from his own aura. And obviously he has Blade Artists, of course, so sometimes his attacks will be at AP 4, which is incredible and very important against Space Marines, for example, with their Armor of Contempt. His Warlord trait, as I said already, gives him full rerolls to hidden wounds, so you obviously want to make him your Warlord all the time and pay that 1 command point for his Warlord trait. And, believe it or not, he can be chosen to fight twice in each fight phase. So his 5 attacks turn basically to 10 attacks at strength 6, AP 3 and damage 3, or his 7 to 14. Incredible. And he also gains the pile-in and consolidation that you have with being activated again a second time, which is another way to move him forward if you want to move him forward. And obviously his +1 to wound aura also affects all incubi within 6 inches of him. Again, incredible, making them even deadlier still. And if there is an Archon nearby, he and all the incubi will also reroll once to hit, because he is incubi and the Archon's aura affects the Drukhari, the Cabal core units and the incubi units as well. And it makes sense because even though the Drazhar is a glorified bodyguard, he is a bodyguard after all. And all that goodness costs you only 145 points. I don't think I need to say that he's definitely worth it. Next is Lilith Hesperax. She's a succubus of the Cult of Strife. I don't really get this model because she's supposed to be extremely deadly in combat, and for some reason she is not. The 7 attacks Relics at strength 4, AP 3 and damage 1 with exploding 6s to hit, or the Tesla exploding 6s if you take her warlord trait. It's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not how the incredible fighty character should fight. The Drazhar, slightly higher in the slide, is the way that such a character should fight, and she's not like that. I don't get why she does not have some rule that allows her to do mortal wounds on 6s or something like that that would help her get through the higher toughness and the armor save, the invulnerable save, or the lack of damage on her part. She also gets the pseudo show stealer. Show stealer is the ability of the master succubus that they get for 15 points, which helps them consolidate 6 inches instead of 3, and they can consolidate in any direction they choose, not just closer to the closest model. And she has full rerolls against characters, full rerolls to hit and wound. So I don't get this model. She costs 90 points, so if you really like the model, by all means knock yourself out, take her, but just don't forget to take another real succubus in a different detachment and give her the warlord traits and relics that we're going to mention further in this video. Next is Urien Rakath. He's the Prophets of Flesh homunculus, and he buffs not only the toughness as the usual typical homunculus does, he also buffs the strength and leadership of the core units within 6 of him. He's much harder to kill than the standard homunculus. He halves damage, he has toughness 6, not toughness 5, he has 6 wounds, and he resurrects on a roll of 2+ once per game. He's close to useless in combat and costs 100 points. The problem I have with him is that he's Prophets of Flesh, so you don't get to use the Artists of Flesh obsession, which is, in my opinion, the best one for the Coven units. Now let's discuss the secondaries, and we'll start with the Purge the Enemy category, the Take Them Alive secondary. At the end of the battle round, score 3 victory points for each enemy character or monster unit that was destroyed by a melee attack made by a Drukhari unit from your army this battle round. Not a bad clause. I think it's pretty easy to score this one, and I would recommend to take it unless you are better off taking the Bring It Out secondary. You will have to calculate that depending on your opponent's list. And the next clause is score 1 victory point for each other enemy unit that was destroyed by a melee attack made by a Drukhari unit from your army this battle round. Score a maximum of 5 victory points per battle round from this secondary objective. I really like this one, and I think it's worth considering for your options. Next is the Battlefield Supremacy category, Herd the Prey. As I already said, it was heavily nerfed, and you only score a single victory point for each table quarter now that doesn't have any enemy units. I think it was correct for the Games Workshop to debuff this secondary, but I think they've gone a little bit too far, and they should have gone as far as they did with the Purge the Vermin secondary of Necrons, because with Necrons they also gave them ability to score a single victory point each turn if there are no enemy units within their deployment zone, which is a more balanced approach in my opinion, and it would make Herd the Prey usable, where now I think it loses completely to the engage on all fronts, especially if we consider that your opponent cannot really affect the engage on all fronts apart from just destroying your units, whereas with Herd the Prey they have all the ways in the world to make it harder for you to score. And the last one is No Mercy, No Respite category, Fear and Terror. You score a victory point each time one of the following things happen. An enemy unit fails a morale test, an enemy unit falls back, and an enemy unit fails an action. In addition to that, each time an enemy unit is destroyed by a melee attack made by a Drukhari model, you roll 2d6. If the result exceeds the leadership characteristic of that enemy model, you score a victory point. A model can, if resurrected, blah blah blah, so basically you can do that a bunch of times. If the models resurrect, you can do that multiple times with a single unit. I don't really like the secondary because failing the morale test is very situational. There are armies that do it quite a lot. Other armies aren't as often in doing that, but they can affect that. That's the problem part. They can affect that by using, for example, the once per game stratagem called Insane Bravery, so they can auto-pass once if they see that their unit is definitely going to fail morale. And falling back, again, sometimes players just don't fall back. They just keep their units in the combat, because if it's a combat unit, you usually don't want to fall back. because you won't be able to fight in this turn. And if it's a shooting unit, especially a vehicle, they can already fire into combat in the engagement range, so they don't have a reason to fall back. And the last one, failing in action, is a very difficult thing to achieve, and you only get a single point for that. I don't think that Fear and Terror is worth it, in my opinion. You are better off choosing something like Abhor the Witch if you're fighting against Psykers, or in No Mercy No Respite category, you can just select good old No Prisoners if you are fighting against a numerous horde. The Synergies section, as I like to say, it's my favorite because it's where the army comes together and we start to feel how it would operate in a real game. First of all, if you want to build a crazy murderous succubus, you cannot go wrong with this combo of Warlord trait and Relic. You get a Triptych Whip, which is a poison 2+, so wounds everything on 2+ except vehicles and Titanic, and AP 3 damage 2 whip with +3 attacks. And you get the competitive edge Warlord trait, which lets you roll again all the attacks that did not reach the inflict damage step. So anything that you have failed to hit with, failed to wound with, or your opponent have rolled a save against, you can roll that again and fight with those attacks again until your opponent either fails the save or not. You can't do that obviously infinite amount of times, but you can do that twice. So first time and the one again time for the Warlord trait. An extremely great Warlord trait. It gives you a real competitive edge against some other units and characters, and your succubus becomes a real tactical nuclear missile with this one. You also need to make her the Master Succubus for the Shoal Stealer ability, because for 15 points you'll be able to get her out of dodge in most of cases, especially if you don't forget to fight with her first, because otherwise she can get counter-offensed and pretty much killed outright. Another great build is the Dark Lotus Toxin Relic, again from the Cult of Strife book, as well as the competitive edge Warlord trait is also from that book. You give her Razor Flails for extra attacks and Precision Blows Warlord trait, and what it does for you is all those damage 2 attacks at strength 5, they do 2 mortal wounds on a hit roll of a 6, so she has a whole bunch of attacks, like 14 of them, and each time you roll a 6, that attack automatically does 2 mortal wounds and the attack sequence ends. A great build. I would probably, if I were to run 2 succubus, I would probably run one with competitive edge and the Triptych Whip, and the other with the Razor Flails and the Precision Blows. In terms of their combat drugs, and the combat drug ability is something that all the Witch Cult units have, so your Bikers, your Hellions, your Witches, you can select a buff pre-game for that unit and it works for the unit the entire game. There are a whole bunch of ways you can modify them: +1 toughness, +2 inches to the movement, +1 attack. In case of Succubus, I like to give her the Adrenalite for the +1 attack, but +2 to the move isn't bad also, because it will make her extremely fast and very zippy, and you will be able to reach stuff that your opponent probably wasn't expecting for you to reach. Archon's best loadout, in my opinion, is the Gym Blade. It's an upgraded Husk Plate, so strength 4, damage 3, AP 3 with +2 attacks, so 7 attacks for the Archon. And the Ancient Evil Warlord trait, pick an enemy unit within 3 inches to fight last. A wonderful trait for the army that does most of its damage in the fight phase. He's going to be a Master Archon. As I said, you want the squad of Trueborn, so once per game he'll also be able to fight with this wonderful Relic Blade twice. Apart from great relics and traits, the reason why we choose Cult of Strife are their stratagems, and the 2 command point Art of the Kill is probably the best one of those. You get full rerolls to wound for combat for one of your Cult of Strife units. It's crazy on a unit of 10 Hellions or 10 Witches and makes them really deadly in combat. You can also use it on a 20-man blob, but it will cost you 3 command points. 2 other stratagems are 1 command point Invigorated by Evisceration, a 4-up and 1 for your Biker infantry units, so your Reavers or your Hellions or your Witches, until the start of your next turn, if they kill completely some unit in combat. And the 2 command point Blade Well Placed, +1 AP in melee for the fight phase. I like this stratagem, but it's very expensive and I'm not sure that you will have the real estate in your command points to squeeze this one in your game. With one command point swift outflanking, you can surprise your opponent and put an out of position transport with a melee unit into strategic reserves. There are some cases in games where you will see that your raider is in a position where even with the move characteristic that it has, it won't get anywhere far and probably will be just left to be shot in the next turn of your opponent. And that's where you spend the command point to put the raider into strategic reserves and outflank it and use it somewhere later in the game. Nice ability to have. Later, when you set up this raider in the reinforcement step, you can use the Murderous Descent stratagem for one command point to disembark whatever melee unit is inside. And it's great because you will be able to charge with that unit, even though they will still need to roll a 9 or whatever they need to roll with their pluses that they have. Next stratagem I like is the Eviscerating Flyby. It's for your Hellions and Reavers. If you have a unit of 5 or less, it's one command point, or 6 or more, it's 2. And you will be able to deal a lot of mortal wounds to the infantry units, because on a roll of a 4-up for each model that you have in the unit, you will do a mortal wound to the intended target. So if you're fighting Custodes, for example, it's a great way to kill 1 or 2 of them if you have a unit of 10. You can also use that against non-infantry targets, but I don't recommend that because you will need to roll a 5-up instead of a 4-up, and it's much less efficient. One command point, Prey on the Weak, is a great way to get rerolls 1 to hit when otherwise you wouldn't have those. You get rerolls if you are targeting a unit that lost at least 1 model, and if they are under half strength, you get full rerolls to hit, and it works both in shooting phase and in the fight phase. A great versatile stratagem to have, especially on your Incubi. If Archon is not nearby, they will be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. To command point Never Stationary is your good old Fire and Fade, which costs 2 command points instead of 1 for the Fire and Fade, but you can use the stratagem multiple times inside the game. So you get an ability to move 7 inches after shooting in the shooting phase. A nice way to get some extra movement or get behind obscuring terrain after firing with your unit. Wonderful to use on a unit of Scourges with 4 Haywire Blasters, for example. I would probably use it in my list on a Ravager to save it from the counter-attack in the first turn. That's of course if I have the command points, which is highly unlikely because I have spent a whole bunch of those before the game on relics and traits. Another stratagem that I forgot to mention in the presentation is the Torturous Craft, the Homunculus Coven stratagem that allows you to reroll all wounds in combat for 1 command point if you're using it on a unit of 10 or less racks and your character, or for 2 if on anything else, so for example your Talos. But it's very efficient, especially if you use it on a unit of like 3 Talos or a whole bunch of Grotesques. Lastly, let's run through the relics. We've mostly already covered all the ones that you definitely need to take, so this section is more of a warning against stuff that you don't really need to take than my recommendation. So Helm of Spite is a single deny for a character. If you deny successfully, the Psyker suffers Perils of the Warp. A single deny is absolutely not enough. I don't understand why Games Workshop even produce relics like that and show them in the books, because no one would take this relic in their sane mind, in my opinion. It should be at least 2 denies for the character and +1 to the deny, and that's how you make someone even consider taking the Helm of Spite. Next is the Prophets of Flesh Fixator Mask. The bearer cannot be overwatched and can make a single unit within 3 inches fight last. An awesome relic, unfortunately only usable by the Prophets of Flesh Coven, but if you are running them, I would definitely take it, because there's no such thing as too many fight lasts in your army. The Rite of the Living Muse, the legendary relic from the 8th edition, where 3 Ravagers with disintegrator cannons and an Archon nearby were just a staple of the Drukhari lists, but those days are gone, and now only your core and Blades for Hire, if you are running a real space raid detachment, units can benefit from this reroll once to wound Aura Relic. I don't think I can recommend this one because there are only a few cases where you would really want to use it and have it, and I wouldn't spend the command points on that if I were you. The File Bouquet, it's again a relic that you would take for your succubus if you don't know how the game works and you don't know which relics are the best. It's a random combo drag that you can select for the bearer. Obviously, you don't want that in comparison to the Triptych Whip or something like the Dark Lotus Toxin. But I just wanted to warn you just in case you were previously misguided. And the last relic is the 4-up Feel No Pain for the Homunculus. It would make him extremely hard to kill, but to be honest, we don't give a flying hellion about the survivability of the single Homunculus when we need to spend our command points on relics that really can change the outcome of the game for us. I'm not saying that the 4-up and Feel No Pain is useless, I'm just saying that there are much more efficient choices out there, and we've mentioned those in the previous sections of the video. Now let's take a look at the roster example, and first is the patrol detachment of the Cabal of the Black Heart. Obviously, again, we are running it because we want that single reroll to hit each time the unit shoots or fights, mainly shoots, but you also get +1 leadership, you also get the ability to count as 1 round higher for the purposes of your Power from Pain, which is nice if you wanted to, I don't know, charge your raider first turn 1 into something to block it, to move block it. I don't know, there are some implementations for this ability, but the main thing is the reroll. So we have the Archon with the Ancient Evil Warlord trait and the Husk Blade, the Gene Blade relic, and the Splintered Genius ability once per game, fight twice. The troops we have Kebelite Trueborn with Dark Lance and 2 blasters, the unit of 10 Incubi, 1 Ravager with Dark Lances, 3 Raiders with Dark Lances, and we move on to the Cult of Strife Patrol. The Succubus with the Adrenalite, the Combative Edge, and the Triptych Whip, the combo that we've mentioned previously, 10 Witches with Adrenalite, 10 Hellions with Adrenalite, 8 Triggers with Painbringer, which is the +1 toughness combat drag, and 2 hit lenses on the Bikers. The last patrol is the Custom Coven of Artist's Flesh, where the HQ is Drazhar, and his Hatred Eternal Warlord trait, he's our Warlord. A 5-man Rex squad to hug the objective the entire game, and 2 units of 2 Talos with Macro Scalpels, Talos Icar Injectors, and the Drukhari Haywire Blasters. And all that comes up to the 2000 points and 1 command point at the start of the game. So that's it, guys. I hope this video was useful for you. I hope that you will be able to use Drukhari more efficiently now that you've seen this video. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.